The sun was dipping low over Lake Serenity, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. I leaned back in my Adirondack chair on the dock, sipping a cold lemonade, the gentle lapping of waves against my boat, the tranquil Titan, soothing my soul. The boat was my pride and joy, a sleek 24-foot pontoon with a glossy navy finish, custom leather seats, and a sound system that could make the fish dance. It wasn't just a boat, it was an extension of me, my escape from the world, my floating sanctuary. But to the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, it was apparently an eyesore. I'd lived on the lake for 3 years in a cozy, cedar-sided cabin I'd built myself after inheriting the land from my eccentric great-uncle, Harold. The property was a gem, 5 acres of wooded shoreline, a private dock, and, as I'd recently discovered while sorting through Harold's dusty old files, complete ownership of Lake Serenity itself. Not just the land, not just the dock, but the entire 200-acre lake. Every drop of water, every lily pad, every bass swimming beneath the surface. It was all legally mine, dear to my family a century ago when the lake was just a nameless fishing hole. The HOA, however, operated under the delusion that they ran the show. Lakeview Estates was a gated community of cookie-cutter McMansions, built around the lake's eastern shore by a developer who'd leased shoreline access from my great-uncle decades ago. The residents, mostly retirees and upwardly mobile types with too much time on their hands, had formed the HOA to enforce their vision of neighborhood harmony. That meant rules. Lots of rules. No loud music after 9 p.m. No unapproved mailbox designs. And, apparently, no boats moored at private docks without HOA approval. The trouble started a month ago when I got a letter, printed on crisp HOA letterhead, complete with a pretentious crest that looked like it was designed in Microsoft Word. Dear Mr. Caleb Dawson, it read, "It has come to our attention that an unauthorized vessel is moored at your dock in violation of Lakeview Estates Regulation 4.2.3. Please remove the vessel within 14 days or face fines and further action. Signed, Margaret P. Wentworth, HOA President." I chuckled when I read it. Margaret Wentworth was the self-appointed queen of Lakeview Estates, a woman whose perm was as unyielding as her determination to control every blade of grass in the neighborhood. I'd met her once at a community barbecue I'd been roped into attending. She'd squinted at my flannel shirt and work boots like I was a raccoon that had wandered into her garden party. "You're the one who lives in that rustic cabin, aren't you?" she'd said, her voice dripping with disdain. I just grinned and offered her a hot dog. I ignored the letter. My dock was on my property, and the tranquil Titan wasn't bothering anyone. Besides, I wasn't even part of their HOA. My land predated their community by decades. But 2 weeks later, another letter arrived, this time threatening a $500 fine and legal escalation. That got my attention, not because I was worried, but because I was annoyed. Who did these people think they were, telling me what I could do with my own boat on my own dock? I decided to pay Margaret a visit. Her house was impossible to miss. A beige monstrosity with faux stone columns and a lawn so manicured it looked like it got a daily haircut. She answered the door in a pastel cardigan, her smile as fake as the plastic flamingos some of her neighbors had stuck in their yards. "Caleb, how lovely to see you," she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I assume you're here about the boat?" "Yup," I said, leaning against a porch railing. "Got your letters. I'm not moving my boat." Her smile tightened. "The HOA has clear rules, Mr. Dawson. That boat is an eyesore, and it's lowering property values. You'll need to comply, or we'll have no choice but to escalate." "Escalate how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "It's my dock, my property. You don't have jurisdiction over me." Her eyes narrowed. "The lake is a shared resource, Mr. Dawson. The HOA oversees its use for the benefit of all residents." That's when I knew I had her. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my back pocket, a copy of the deed I'd found in Harold's files. "Funny thing about that lake," I said, handing it to her. "It's not shared. I own it, all of it, every inch of shoreline, every gallon of water. My family's had the deed since 1923. Margaret's face went through a fascinating transformation. Shock, disbelief, then a flicker of panic before she recovered her composure. This can't be right, she stammered, scanning the document. The HOA has always managed the lake. Managed it how? I pressed. You've got a lease for shoreline access. Sure, but the lake itself? That's mine. So, technically, every time one of your residents dips a toe in the water, they're on my property. She thrust the paper back at me. We'll have our lawyers look into this. In the meantime, that boat needs to go. I shrugged. Good luck with that. The next week was quiet, but I knew Margaret wasn't done. Sure enough, I came home one evening to find a tow truck parked near my dock. Two guys in coveralls unhooking the Tranquil Titan from its mooring. A small crowd of HOA busybodies had gathered, whispering and pointing. Margaret stood at the front, arms crossed, looking smug. "Hey!" I shouted, jogging down the path. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of the tow guys glanced up. "HOA hired us to remove the boat. Sir, we're just doing our job." "Your job?" I said, planting myself between them and the boat. "You're on my property, messing with my boat without my permission. That's called theft." Margaret stepped forward. "We have every right to enforce our regulations, Mr. Dawson. You were warned." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Margaret, you're trespassing. You're trying to steal my boat. And you're standing on land I own, next to a lake I own. You want to talk rights? Let's talk about mine." The crowd went silent. The tow guys exchanged uneasy looks. Margaret's face turned the color of her flamingo pink cardigan. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "You can't own a lake." "Oh, but I can," I said, grinning. "And I do. Want to see the deed again." The tow guys backed off, mumbling something about needing to check with their boss. The crowd started to disperse, some of them shooting Margaret dirty looks. Apparently, not everyone was thrilled with her power trip. She stormed off, promising to take this to the board. That night, I sat on my dock, the Tranquil Titan bobbing gently beside me. The lake was calm, the stars reflecting on its surface like a second sky. But I knew this wasn't over. Margaret and her HOA cronies weren't the type to back down. They'd come at me with lawyers, maybe try to dig up some obscure regulation or loophole, and I'd be ready. The next morning, I woke up to an email from a lawyer representing the HOA. They were requesting a meeting to discuss the lake's ownership and usage rights. Attached was a 20-page document full of legal jargon, claiming the HOA had historical precedent for managing the lake. I laughed out loud. Historical precedent? My deed was older than their entire neighborhood. I decided to do some digging of my own. I called up my buddy Jake, a real estate attorney with a knack for sniffing out dirt. "Caleb, this is gold," he said after I sent him the deed. "Not only do you own the lake, but that lease the HOA has been operating under, it's had some serious gaps. They've been overstepping for years." "Overstepping how?" I asked. "For one, they've been charging residents lake maintenance fees without your family's consent. That's your money, technically. And they've been restricting access to parts of the lake, like that swimming beach on the north side, that they don't have rights to." I leaned back in my chair, grinning. "So what's our next move?" Jake chuckled. "We could play nice and negotiate, or we go big. Send them a cease and desist letter. Demand they stop all lake-related activities until they prove their rights. Maybe even hit them with a bill for all those maintenance fees they've been pocketing." I liked the sound of going big, but before I could decide, I heard a commotion outside. I stepped onto my porch to see a group of Lakeview residents gathered at the edge of my property, holding signs that read "Save Our Lake" and "No Private Lakes." Margaret was at the front, megaphone in hand, rallying the crowd like she was leading a revolution. "Caleb Dawson is trying to steal our lake," she shouted. "We won't let him privatize our community's greatest asset." I grabbed my own megaphone. Okay, it was just a bullhorn I used for fishing tournaments, and stepped outside. "Margaret, you're standing on my land again," I called. "And that lake you're so worried about? Check the deed. It's been mine longer than you've been alive." The crowd murmured, some looking confused, others skeptical. A guy in a polo shirt yelled, "You can't own a lake. It's public property." "Nope," I said, holding up a copy of the deed. private property. My property. You've all been swimming in my backyard for years, and I haven't charged you a dime. You're welcome, by the way. That got a few laughs, but Margaret wasn't having it. This is a community lake, she insisted. We'll fight this in court if we have to. I lowered the bullhorn and smiled. Bring it on. As the crowd dispersed, I noticed a few residents lingering, looking more curious and angry. One of them, an older guy named Tom who'd always wave when he passed by in his kayak, approached me. Is it true, he asked. You really own the whole lake? Every drop, I said. He whistled. That's wild. So, what are you going to do about it? I glanced at the tranquil Titan, still moored peacefully at my dock. For now, I'm going to take my boat out and enjoy my lake. Want to come? Tom grinned. Hell yeah. As we pushed off from the dock, the engine humming and the water sparkling under the midday sun, I couldn't help but wonder what Margaret and her HOA army would try next. A lawsuit? A petition? Maybe they'd try to bribe me with a lifetime supply of their awful community barbecue ribs. Whatever it was, I was ready. Owning a lake came with its perks, but it also came with a fight, and I was just getting started. As the tranquil Titan glided across Lake Serenity, the water smooth as glass beneath us, Tom leaned back in the passenger seat, a cold soda in his hand. Man, Caleb, he said, squinting at the shoreline where the HOA's McMansions gleamed in the sunlight, you've got yourself a real mess with Margaret and her crew. They're not going to let this go. I steered the boat toward the center of the lake, where the water was deepest and the world felt a little quieter. Let em try, I said. I've got the deed, the law, and a stubborn streak wider than this lake. They'll burn out before I do. Tom chuckled, but his expression turned thoughtful. You know, not everyone in Lakeview is on Margaret's side. A lot of folks just want to enjoy the lake without all the drama. You might have more allies than you think. That got me thinking. The HOA had been throwing its weight around for years, but maybe their grip on the community wasn't as tight as they thought. If I could show the residents that I wasn't the villain Margaret was painting me as, maybe I could turn the tide, pun intended. Over the next few days, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of just waving my deed around and yelling about my rights, I'd show the neighborhood what Lake Serenity could be without the HOA's iron fist. Step 1, throw a lake party. Not one of those stuffy HOA barbecues with lukewarm potato salad and Margaret's speech about community standards, but a real no-rules, come-as-you-are bash. I printed up flyers, simple ones, nothing fancy, and slipped them into mailboxes around Lakeview estates. Lake Serenity Bash, they read. Bring your swimsuits, your fishing rods, and your good vibes. Food, music, and boats provided. No HOA approval required. I made sure to include a little note at the bottom. Hosted by Caleb Dawson, proud owner of Lake Serenity. The day of the party, I was nervous. What if nobody showed? What if Margaret had scared everyone off with her megaphone rants? But as I fired up the grill on my dock and cranked the music, classic rock, loud enough to echo across the water, but not so loud it'd wake the fish, I saw people trickling in. First, it was Tom and his wife, Linda, who brought a homemade apple pie that smelled like heaven. Then a young couple from down the shore, their toddler waddling behind with a tiny life jacket. Soon, there were dozens of people, some I recognized, some I didn't, sprawled across my lawn, splashing the lake, and queuing up for burgers. I'd borrowed a few extra boats from a buddy who ran a rental shop in town, so folks could take turns cruising around the lake. Kids were tubing, adults were fishing, and a group of teenagers had set up an impromptu volleyball game on the shore. The tranquil Titan was the star of the show, ferrying groups out to the lake's center for sunset views. Nobody mentioned HOA rules. Nobody cared about approved vessels. For the first time in years, Lake Serenity felt like it belonged to everyone. Of course, Margaret couldn't resist crashing the party. She showed up around dusk, flanked by 2 other HOA board members, both clutching clipboards like they were about to audit my soul. The music was still thumping, and a group of kids were roasting marshmallows over a fire pit I'd set up. Margaret's face was a storm cloud. "Caleb," she barked, striding toward me. "This is an unauthorized gathering. You're violating at least 6 HOA regulations. not to mention noise ordinances. I handed her a burger, still sizzling from the grill. Margaret, relax, have some food, enjoy the lake. It's a beautiful night. She swatted the plate away, nearly knocking it into the water. This is unacceptable. You can't just throw parties on our lake. Your lake? Linda, Tom's wife, piped up from a nearby lawn chair. She'd had a couple of lemonades, not the alcoholic kind, but she was fired up anyway. Caleb showed us the deed, Margaret. This is his lake. Maybe you should be thanking him for letting us use it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw heads nodding, a few people whispering to each other. Margaret's face went from red to purple. The HOA has managed this lake for decades, she insisted. We have rights. Then show us your deed, Tom called out, crossing his arms. If you've got legal claim to the lake, let's see it. The crowd went quiet, waiting for her response. Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her clipboard buddies shifted uncomfortably. Finally, she snapped, "This isn't over, Caleb. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." As she stormed off, the party roared back to life. Someone cranked the music louder, and a cheer went up when I announced free boat rides for the rest of the night. By the time the stars were out, I felt like I'd won a small victory, not just over Margaret, but for the lake itself. These people weren't my enemies. They were my neighbors, and most of them just wanted to enjoy the water like I did. But the next morning, I woke up to a new problem. My phone was buzzing with notifications from the Lakeview Estates Community app. Apparently, Margaret had posted a scathing, open letter about me, accusing me of undermining community values and creating a public nuisance. She'd even included a blurry photo of my party, with the Tranquil Titan front and center, captioned, "This unauthorized vessel is just the start of Caleb Dawson's reckless behavior." I groaned. The woman was relentless. But then I noticed something else in the app. Comments. Dozens of them. From residents who'd been at the party. "Best night on the lake in years." One read, "Caleb's not the problem. HOA rules are," said another. Someone had even posted a meme of Margaret's megaphone with the caption, "When your HOA president thinks she owns the world." I was still scrolling when Jake, my lawyer buddy, called. "Caleb, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. I dug into the HOA's lease agreement for the shoreline. It's set to expire in 3 months. And guess what? Your great-uncle never renewed it with the current board. They've been operating on an outdated contract for years. I sat up straight. So what does that mean? It means when that lease expires, you can decide who gets access to the lake and on what terms. You could charge them, restrict them, or kick the HOA out entirely. Ascertain. Your call. My mind was racing. This was bigger than just keeping my boat. I could rewrite the rules for the entire lake. But first, I had to deal with Margaret's latest attack. I wasn't about to let her smear campaign ruin the goodwill I'd built at the party. I needed a plan. Something big. Something that would show the neighborhood I was here to stay, and that Lake Serenity was mine to share, not hers to control. As I hopped aboard the Tranquil Titan for a morning cruise to clear my head, I noticed a small group of kids waving from the shore, hoping for another boat ride. I grinned and waved back. The lake was mine, but maybe it was time to make it ours, without Margaret and her clipboards calling the shots. The question was, how far was I willing to go to make that happen? The morning breeze swept across Lake Serenity, carrying the scent of pine and the faint hum of the Tranquil Titan's engine as I cruised toward the north end of the lake. Those kids waving from the shore were still on my mind. They'd been at the party, laughing and splashing, their parents relaxed for once without the HOA breathing down their necks. It hit me that this fight wasn't just about my boat anymore. It was about what the lake could mean to everyone who lived here, not just Margaret's clique of rule enforcers. As I docked the boat, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Check the community app. Margaret's doubling down. I opened the app and saw her latest post, a petition titled, "Preserve Our Lake, Stop Caleb Dawson's Takeover." It already had 30 signatures, mostly from her inner circle, demanding that the HOA protect community access to the lake. The comments were a mixed bag. Some echoed her outrage, but others called her out, saying the lake party had been the most fun they'd had in years. One user, Lake Lover 22, wrote, "Why is the HOA acting like they own the place? Caleb's the one with the deed." I smirked. Margaret was losing her grip, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Her petition mentioned an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for tomorrow night at the community center. Perfect. If she wanted a showdown, I'd give her one, but on my terms. I called Jake, my lawyer buddy, to strategize. She's rallying the troops. I said, "This meeting's going to be a circus. Any ideas on how to play it?" Jake laughed. "Show up with the deed, for starters. But don't just play defense. You got leverage with that expiring lease. Use it. Let the residents know you're not trying to lock them out. You're trying to free the lake from the HOA's stranglehold." He had a point. The HOA's lease on the shoreline was expiring in less than 3 months, and they'd been coasting on an outdated agreement for years. I could let it lapse, renegotiate, or even open the lake to everyone on my own terms. But first, I needed to win over the residents who were on the fence. Margaret's petition was gaining traction, and I couldn't afford to let her narrative take hold. That afternoon, I got to work. I fired up my old laptop and designed a new flyer, this one inviting everyone to the HOA meeting. "Lake Serenity belongs to all of us," it read. "Come learn the truth about the lake and decide its future together." Hosted by Caleb Dawson. I printed a stack and spent the evening biking around Lakeview Estates, taping them to lampposts and mailboxes, carefully avoiding Margaret Street, where I was sure she'd rip them down. I also reached out to a few allies from the party. Linda, Tom's wife, was a retired graphic designer and offered to whip up a quick presentation to explain the lake's ownership history in simple terms. Tom rounded up a dozen residents who'd had enough of the HOA's overreach, and they agreed to speak up at the meeting. Even the young couple with a toddler, Sarah and Mike, volunteered to bring snacks to keep things friendly. I was starting to feel like I had a team. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Folding chairs lined the room, and the air buzzed with tension. Margaret stood at the front, her clipboard replaced by a podium and a microphone, her perm as immovable as ever. Her 2 board members flanked her, passing out copies of her petition like it was a sacred text. I slipped in quietly, my copy of the deed tucked into a folder, and took a seat near the back. Tom, Linda, and a few others nodded at me from across the room. Margaret opened the meeting with a speech that could have doubled as a campaign ad. "Lakeview Estates is a community built on shared values," she declared, her voice booming through the mic. "But one individual, Caleb Dawson, is threatening our way of life by claiming ownership of our lake. We cannot allow this privatization to stand." A few people clapped, but I noticed others shifting uncomfortably. I caught Sarah's eye, and she gave me a thumbs up as she handed out cookies to the crowd. Time to make my move. I stood and raised my hand. "Mind if I say something, Margaret?" Her eyes narrowed, but the room was watching, and she couldn't exactly say no. "Fine," she said, stepping aside. "But keep it brief." I walked to the podium, pulling out the deed and holding it up. "This is the deed to Lake Serenity, dated 1923. It's been in my family for a century. I don't just own the land around my cabin. I own the entire lake. Every drop. That's not a claim. It's a fact." The room erupted in whispers. Margaret tried to interrupt, but I kept going. "The HOA has been telling you they manage the lake, but their lease for shoreline access, not ownership, is expiring in 3 months. And here's the kicker. They've been charging you lake maintenance fees without my family's permission. That's your money, folks, and it's been going to their pet projects, not the lake." A guy in the front row, wearing a golf shirt and a skeptical frown, raised his hand. "So what? You're going to kick us all off the lake? No more swimming, no more fishing?" "Nope," I said, smiling. "I want you all out there enjoying the lake. Swimming, fishing, boating, whatever makes you happy. But I think we can do better than the HOA's rulebook. No more fines for unapproved kayaks. No more bans on dock decorations. And definitely no more threats to tow my boat." That got a laugh, and I felt the room start to shift. Linda stepped up with her laptop and projected a timeline on the wall, showing the lake's ownership history and the HOA's shaky lease. Caleb's not the bad guy here, she said. He's offering to open the lake to everyone, not just the HOA's favorites. Margaret was fuming. This is absurd, she snapped. The HOA has maintained this lake for decades. We built beaches, installed buoys, kept it clean. With whose money? Tom called out. Ours. And you never asked Caleb's family if you could. The room got loud again, with people arguing on both sides. I let it play out. Knowing the more they debated, the more Margaret's control slipped. Finally, Sarah stood up, holding her toddler on her hip. Look, I don't care about deeds or leases, she said. I just want my kid to grow up swimming in this lake, without someone telling me it's against the rules. Caleb threw a party for all of us. No fees, no forms. Why can't we have more of that? The crowd clapped, louder this time. Margaret tried to regain control, banging on the podium. We'll take this to court if we have to, she shouted. The HOA will not stand for this. I leaned into the mic. Go ahead, Margaret, but you might want to check with your lawyers first. That lease of yours? It's got more holes than a fishing net. As the meeting broke up, people crowded around me, asking questions. Some were still wary, but others were excited, talking about fishing tournaments, community boat parades, even a floating movie night on the lake. I could see the wheels turning. Lake Serenity was starting to feel like a place where people could dream again, but I wasn't naive. Margaret's threat of a lawsuit wasn't empty, and the HOA had deep pockets from all those maintenance fees. The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox, summoning me to a preliminary legal consultation with the HOA's attorneys. Jake was thrilled when I told him. They're bluffing, he said. They know their lease is shaky, so they're trying to scare you. Let's hit back with a letter of our own. Demand they produce proof of their lake rights or cease all activities. I liked the sound of that, but I also knew I needed to keep the community on my side. The lake party had been hit, but I needed something bigger to show I was serious about sharing the lake. As I sat on my dock, watching the tranquil Titan bob in the water, an idea hit me. A Lake Serenity festival. Not just a party, but a full-blown event. Food, music, games, and free boat rides for everyone. It'd be a chance to show the neighborhood what the lake could be without the HOA's rules, and maybe, just maybe, it'd convince them to join me in rewriting the future of Lake Serenity. As I started sketching out plans for the festival, I heard a splash and looked up to see a kid doing a cannonball off the public beach. A beach the HOA had locked down for maintenance half the summer. I grinned. This was my lake, but it was their lake too, and I was ready to fight for it. The sun was rising over Lake Serenity, casting a golden glow across the water as I sipped my coffee on the dock, the tranquil Titan bobbing gently beside me. The past few weeks have been a whirlwind. Margaret's petition, the tense HOA meeting, and the looming threat of a lawsuit from her legal team. But I had a plan to end this on my terms, and it was going to be big. The Lake Serenity Festival. It wasn't just about proving I owned the lake. It was about showing the community what this place could mean to all of us, free from the HOA's suffocating rules. I'd spent days organizing the festival, rallying my newfound allies. Tom and Linda were all in, with Linda designing colorful posters and Tom spreading the word to every neighbor who'd ever grumbled about the HOA. Sarah and Mike, the young couple with a toddler, recruited local vendors to set up food stalls, everything from tacos to homemade ice cream. Even the kids from the lake party chipped in, painting signs that read, "Welcome to our lake," and stringing fairy lights along the shoreline. The festival was set for Saturday, and I'd made it clear. No HOA approval needed, no fees, just fun. But Margaret wasn't sitting idle. The day before the festival, I got a call from Jake, my lawyer buddy. "Caleb, the HOA's lawyers just sent a cease and desist letter," he said. "They're claiming your festival is an unauthorized use of community resources and demanding you cancel it or face legal action." I laughed. "Community resources? It's my lake, Jake. They're grasping at straws." "Exactly," he said. "Their lease expires in 2 weeks, and they know they've got nothing. I'm drafting a response that'll make their head spin, reminding them you could revoke their shoreline access entirely. But you need to make this festival a home run. Show the neighborhood you're not the bad guy." The morning of the festival, Lake Serenity was alive with energy. The air smelled of grilled corn and sunscreen and music. Live this time, thanks to a local band that owed Tom a favor. Echoed across the water. My dock was a hub, with the Tranquil Titan ferrying folks out for rides, while other boats I'd borrow from friends cruise alongside. Kids splash in the shallows. Adults lounge on picnic blankets, and a fishing contest had half the neighborhood casting lines for bragging rights. I'd even set up a lake history booth, where Linda handed out copies of the deed and explained how my family had owned the lake since 1923. People were starting to get it. The HOA's control was a myth, and the lake could be so much more. Around noon, I spotted Margaret and her clipboard posse lurking near the food stalls, whispering and glaring. I braced myself for trouble, but instead of confronting me, she marched to the center of the festival, megaphone in hand. The band paused, and heads turned as her voice blared. "This event is a violation of HOA regulations," she declared. "Caleb Dawson is undermining our community's values and privatizing our lake." The crowd went quiet, and I felt my stomach tighten. This was her last stand, and she was banking on fear to sway people. But before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her toddler balanced on her hip. "Margaret, enough?" she said, loud enough to carry without a megaphone. "Caleb's not privatizing anything. He's sharing the lake with all of us, something you've never done without a rule book and a fine." Tom joined in, holding up a fishing rod. "Yeah, when's the last time the HOA threw a party like this? Or let my kids swim without a permit? Caleb's got the deed, and he's still letting us use the lake. What's your excuse?" The crowd started clapping, then cheering. Margaret's face flushed, but she pressed on. "We'll see him in court. The HOA has managed this lake for decades, and we won't let one man take it away." That's when I grabbed my own bullhorn and stepped onto a picnic table. "Margaret, you keep talking about court, but let's be real," I said, holding up the deed. "This says I own Lake Serenity. Your lease? It's expiring, and it's been shaky for years. You've been charging these folks maintenance fees for my lake, and you've got no legal leg to stand on. So, here's my offer. Let's work together. I'll open the lake to everyone, no fees, no fines, but the HOA needs to back off. No more rules about my boat or anyone else's." The cheers grew louder, and I saw people nodding, even some of Margaret's usual supporters. She opened her mouth to argue, but a voice cut through the crowd. An older woman, Mrs. Carter, who'd lived in Lakeview longer than anyone. "Margaret, I've been paying your fees for years, and all I get is a lock beach half the summer," she said. "Caleb's right. Let's share the lake, not fight over it." Margaret's clipboard buddies looked like they wanted to sink into the ground. The crowd was turning, and she knew it. She lowered her megaphone, muttered something about reviewing our options, and stormed off with her posse trailing behind. The band struck up again, and the festival roared back to life, louder than ever. As the sun set, painting the lake in hues of pink and gold, I took the Tranquil Titan out for one last ride, with Tom, Linda, Sarah, Mike, and a few kids piled on board. We cruised to the lake center, the music and laughter from the shore fading into the distance. "You did it, Caleb," Linda said, raising a soda can in a toast. "You took on the HOA and won." "Not yet," I said, grinning. "The lease expires soon, and I've got plans. A community council, maybe, where everyone gets a say, not just the HOA's favorites. Free access to the lake, fishing derbies, maybe even a floating stage for concerts." "Sign me up," Tom said, and the kids cheered, already begging for another boat ride. As we glided back toward the dock, the fairy lights twinkling along the shore, I felt a weight lift. The fight wasn't over. Margaret might still try her luck in court, and there'd be details to hammer out with the lease. But for now, Lake Serenity was alive, not just with water and fish, but with people laughing, kids playing, and neighbors dreaming together. The Tranquil Titan had started this battle, but the lake itself had won the day, and I had a feeling the best was yet to come.